I'm going to Hey everybody, it's me, Lawrence Prezman, the Prez, co-founder of Wager Talk Media, and very rarely do I have a namesake joining me, Marc Lawrence, one of my dear friends in this industry, a man I've known for 20 years. How are you, Marc? And thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, I'm doing well, Lawrence. It must be a pandemic if you and I are getting together. Right now, I'm doing real well, and I hope you and your family are safe and doing well throughout all this crisis.
We are. I mean, listen, I think I got it good. I'm a divorced guy, so I have my kids every 7 out of 14 days, 1 week on, 1 week off. It's hard to decide which week is better. It's easy to decide which week is better, but I need to keep my voice down as this isn't the better week. But it's a good balance. You know, and I'm really lucky, Marc. My eldest is 19, my youngest is 16 and a half, and they're at this amazing age where, I mean, last night we played 5 hours of rummy. When was the last time you did 5 hours of anything with your children?
Maybe at Cedar Point Amusement Park. That might have been it, but, that was going way back to when they were, as you said, 12 and 19 years old, so it's been a long time.
Yeah, and to me, it's literally the best because I'm just getting such incredible time with them, and it's time that I'll never get again. So, and also it's not every day because on Friday I go 7 days without them. So it's a beautiful balance. How's your beautiful wife? How are your children? What's going on with you?
Well, everything is great. My wife is doing terrific. We're getting a little bit confined here right now under quarantine, although we're staying in touch with the outer world a lot through tweeting, texting, Zoom, so forth and whatnot. But the bottom line here is we're getting to know each other a lot better these days, maybe a little bit too much that way these days. But I had one customer that texted me and said that about being quarantined, he says he's doing everything he possibly can to gain as much weight as he possibly can during this quarantine. It's all because of the pot shops in Los Angeles. He says they deliver. He's got no chance at all.
Vivi just logged on. My girlfriend, Vivian Prezman. Good name. So she's on. Marc, I get a lot of slack for using a picture, a headshot on Wager Talk that's got to be 15 to 20 years old. It was inspired by you.
You're coming to the source.
Yeah, every time somebody says something, I'm like, Marc Lawrence is using a headshot from 1942. I'm still 20 years to go. Have you changed yours at all, or is it still that incredibly handsome 50-year-old picture?
Well, it's that 50-year-old patient that, as you mentioned before, people think it's my bar mitzvah picture, but it's not. I'm not Jewish. It's not that. I can tell you that. It's just something that we did back then. I liked it. I'm not going to change it until the day they put me 6 feet under. So that's the way it happens.
Well, let's hope that's not for a while. Hey, director, thanks for logging in. Yes, Chris, we know you're there. You've been looking forward to the show all week. We get it. Marc, let's, right off the bat, we're going to talk, basically I'm interviewing you. We're going to talk sports betting. We're going to talk about your career. We're going to talk about how you started. We're going to talk about your business. Right off the bat, though, I'm going to ask you the following question, and that is, we are competitors. You own PLAYBOOK. It's a successful handicapping company. Offhand, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, I gotta think Jim Feist, Phil Steele, I gotta think they might be the only two people on the planet that have sold more picks than you. Would you say you're third, fourth? I mean, can you think of anybody else over a 50-year period?
Well, I think you got to throw the Covers group in there right now. They're doing a really great job. It's Covers.
I'm not talking about companies. I'm talking about Marc Lawrence.
Oh, myself personally.
Yeah.
Okay.
Plus, Covers. We have no relationship with them. We're not here to talk about them, but we do love you. So, Marc Lawrence himself, third most sold picks of all time. I would go out and say. I mean, it's close. There are others, but I can't think of any.
Well, let me tell you how that all happened, Lawrence. And it was back in the day when Dave Malinsky, our good friend Dave Malinsky,
The late Dave, yep.
We both started Playbook together. I don't think many people realize that.
I didn't know that.
No, Dave and I started Playbook together. Dave is a terrific writer, as you well know. He was a human analyst.
Yeah.
Just a great human being. We had a great friendship. And he wrote for Sporting Times that he and I decided let's do something together. So we formed Playbook together. We did it together for a couple of years, and Dave wanted to go out and explore other pastures. He's the kind of a guy that you can't keep in the barn too long. He likes to be out there. So we parted mutually that way. And then as things grew with Playbook, and Playbook began to grow quite a bit from that point forward here, then came the advent of the 900 business. Remember the 900
Yeah, of course.
line?
And Jim Feist was on last week. We were talking about that. You probably had to rent your numbers from him.
I had a bank full of numbers from Jim Feist. I had them from a couple of people, but Jim was our largest 900 line provider.
Yeah.
And back in the day when Jim was providing all those lines so graciously, it was my idea that, in this 900 world that we lived in, which was about the only way to get picks that if people didn't want to call directly into an office, and I never ever, to this day, have ever boiler room sold anybody. I don't have a sales office. I don't do that. But the bottom line to me is when the 900 telephone business was here, I wanted to do something that would set myself apart from the industry, and that was guaranteeing these 900 selections or picks that I was making. So if they called the number, I gave them a code. If it didn't work, they got a free selection. That's what really vaulted me to the top because, people like that idea. I don't win, I don't pay. So that was very, very successful for us all throughout the 900 industry. Then along came the internet, which was good for everybody.
But you've been tech savvy, and your son as well, Mark. I mean, you and I spoke recently. I mean, as of last year, you were working on apps. I mean, you are a tech savvy guy.
Well, I'm more under the wing of my son, if I can say that. Okay, I do like to think forward. I'm a forward thinker, and I like to be one step ahead of thinking outside the box and doing things like that. So when the internet came and we went into the website business with our Playbook and our preferred picks industry business of selections, it was good and it still is good. But back in the day, I'm going to go back to the 909s. There wasn't as much competition, but we also have been fortunate along the way then to have our own proprietary database, and that proprietary database is really what helped keep Playbook moving along successfully because that's the brains and the guts behind the whole operation.
We're gonna talk about that database a little later in the show. Sorry to interrupt.
Well, that's kind of where it all got to. That's where we're at today. Then we began publishing a magazine, which is very, very quite successful. This will be our 28th year of our Playbook Football Preview Guide magazine. Proud to say it's the best-selling football magazine in all of Las Vegas. It'll be coming out June 28th, a little plug if I may. We're working on that right now, and we're forging forward, Lawrence, on the premise that there is going to be a football season this year. And I'm firmly of that belief, and I've got a little bit of inside intel into that. I don't want to share it exclusively because I don't want to be wrong and paint a picture that ends up not being that way, but I'm talking with a couple of executives in Major League Sports and helping them along the way. They have to do testing with this coronavirus right now, and I'm helping them with the testing. I'm helping to introduce them to platforms and programs. So if we can get this done, we can help get the NBA, Major League Baseball, and eventually football back on the playing field.
Terrific. I want to welcome Marc Lawrence. Guys, thanks so much for logging on, joining us. Johnny H-Pack, hello, my friend. OG1, how are you? Kane, I love seeing you. Teddy Savransky commented he didn't know that Dave Malinsky was your partner at the beginning, and Teddy and Dave were extremely close friends. So I don't think a lot of people did know. Mark, I want to ask you a follow-up question to what you were talking about, because we've been speaking to a lot of people on Meet the Experts. We do it Monday and Tuesday. for the last month or so. We had Bruce Marshall on yesterday. We had Feist on. We've had Koken and Leonard and a lot of the old school guys. I got into this industry in 99, and it was pretty much towards, look, the 900 numbers were still going in 99, 98. The boiler rooms were still in full effect, but the industry was starting to shift, and we saw that shift. What I want to ask you is, because I really think one of the most interesting thing you've said is, as a guy who was in this industry in the core of the boiler room era, you were never a boiler room. You never made outbound phone calls to people. How did you cope? Like, how did you internalize the fact that your competitors were doing it and you were leaving just a ton, and I mean 10 times ton of money on the table by not going that route?
I'm glad you recognize that, Lawrence, because I have left a lot of money on
Me
the table.
too,
because
Mark.
of that.
Me too. I had guys, sorry to interrupt, I had guys who was offering, do my picks, Prez, we'll give you 30% of all the winnings. And I mean, me and you have both left millions on the table, but please continue.
Well, it even goes so far as to, I don't sell my customers' names to anybody either. And the reason is because I run my business like I run my life. I do it by the golden rule. I treat people the way that I would like to be treated, and in return, I get that back. And that's the whole reward of life. Every morning when I brush my teeth, every morning I have to like the person that I'm looking at in the mirror. And if I were in the boiler room sales operation, I would have rotten teeth. I couldn't look in the mirror, okay? It's not my way. I could never do that. So, and I also enjoy helping to educate people along the way, to teach them to become better at this trade. So I want to, I want to roll up my sleeves and get into it. I don't just want to sell picks, and I don't want to just take a person's bank card. I want to help inform them so that they can make better decisions of what they're doing when it comes to handicapping.
Mark, I've got, Rick Alex, the CEO of Wager Talk. His beautiful wife, Tina, she told him something, and then he told me, and now I've got her whispering in my ear, don't make this show about you, Lawrence.
Which Lawrence?
Me. So I'm going to focus on keeping this show about you. So Mark, we take questions throughout the show. I'm not going in any particular order, so let's answer this question from Donnell Allen, because it's a very important question, and that is, if you want to make a living in sports gambling, what's the ideal bankroll? I have an answer to that, but you go first.
Well, the ideal bankroll comes after you've learned the things that you're supposed to be doing properly. The do's and the don'ts of handicapping, learning handicapping 101. And it doesn't matter to me or to anybody that I talk to. Our customers, we have a range of customers, Lawrence, that buy an executive package from me, down to buying $10 picks from me, or buying the newsletter, okay? And it doesn't matter what their bankroll is. All that matters is they establish a bankroll and then play within the bankroll. That's critical.
Yep.
They have to be able to do that. It doesn't matter if you're a 10-dime player or you're a $10 player, 10 Little George player. It doesn't matter. As long as you're playing within a bankroll and you can afford to lose. You don't have to end up losing sleep, separating yourself from your family because you're gambling and you're getting out of control. My motto has always been to bet with your head, not over it. And that all plays into having a bankroll and doing that. You have to treat this like a business, first and foremost. And if you're going to run a business, you have to have a business plan. You have to have an idea and a goal in the way that you're going to achieve that. And when it comes to handicapping and betting on games, it starts first and foremost with the bankroll.
Yeah, Donnell, I agree 100% with what Mark is saying. You have to play inside of the bankroll that you've created. We at Wager Talk suggest you guys bet 3, 4, 5% of your bankroll on any given play, never more. And that also allows you to take advantage of exponential growth when you're on a big run, or the opposite of exponential growth. That word doesn't exist when you're in a slump. But really, the answer as far as how do you make a living doing it, look, everybody's living is different. I mean, Jesus, the real estate in Toronto is so utterly ridiculous that my living would have to be 3 times the living of somebody sitting in Las Vegas just based on real estate. So it's hard to answer that question, but the bottom line is you need to figure out what type of income you need a year. So if you need $100,000 a year to live, pay for your wife, your children, your mortgage, your cars, I think you should expect to make, on average, I don't know, Mark, 20, 30% return on investment if you bet, if you get the right information and you bet carefully and patiently. So if that's the case, you're going to need a pretty substantial bankroll to generate $100,000, $80,000 a year to live on. Don't look at this as a way to enter the industry and become a professional sports gambler. Enter this industry for fun and slowly build your bankroll up, and 20 years, 10 years later, ideally, you will be in position where you can do this for a living. But have you ever met anybody who went from zero to doing this for a living?
Not too many people, and I was just going to say that in all of everything we're talking about here, there aren't too many people that are in my arena, in the Playbook arena, that do this for a living. They're doing it for the satisfaction of wagering on games, watching games, and enjoying that. That's the main purpose, and that's the main goal, and that's terrific because there's no harm, no foul in doing just that. If you decide that you want to step out from that and you want to make this your occupation, your living, then you need to step things up and you have to plan accordingly. It starts with your bankroll. Obviously, you have to set that aside, predetermine it, and then, as you say, what are you looking to do? Are you looking to win $100,000, $200,000 a year? If you're going to do that, you have to start accordingly with your bankroll and learn how to wager properly.
I will tell you one thing, Donnell, and everybody out there. You can make a living as a sports bettor right off the bat. If you start with, say, $10 million and you bet parlays every day, you can make that $10 million into $1 million over a 4-year period. But you should still have enough to live for that 5-year period. Mark.
Yeah.
Yep.
But that's not making a living, Teddy.
No.
That's giving a living away.
Yeah, that's giving it away. Well said. Mark, David Chan just asked us, and I got a bunch of questions I'm going to ask you, but I'm in no rush here. I mean, what are we, quarantining? I got a quarantine beard, by the way. Fully gray, except the mustache.
Is that touched up the mustache?
No, it just won't go gray. But it has to go on Friday, because on Friday my kids move out and my girl Vivian moves in, and I've been given an ultimatum. So Friday it goes. You know how it works, Mark. I've met your wife. We do what we're told. David Chan asks, can we provide an explanation for the word scalping? Is it the same as middling?
Well, in our world, people that like to middle games, they're basically scalping. What they're doing is, obviously, if they're smart about what it is they're doing, they're looking to scalp numbers that are good numbers, your 3s, your 7s. In football, in situations like that, it's a lot like teasing games. I'm not a proponent at all of teasing or playing parlays. I think that's the path to ruination of either teasing or parlaying. But if you're going to tease games, you're going to want to tease games through the key numbers, through the 3s and through the 7s. The same with scalping. If you're going to look to scalp games, you don't want to scalp a number just because you've got 2 numbers that are out there, an 8 and a 9 on a football game. You're going to end up burning yourself out with juice. Yeah. So I'm going to recommend the same thing. If you're going to end up wanting to spread games or scalp these games, do them around the key numbers.
Mark, I don't mean to be rude, but keep the rocking to a minimum.
I understand.
Yeah,
it keeps the old man up and alive. Okay.
Mark, what do you think? We started the show. I was talking about the fact that, look, your business is a competitor to ours. There's some people say, why are we bringing our competitors onto these shows? Jim Feist, yourself. I love the two of you, and I wish, you have been nothing but kind and generous to me over the years, so I'm more than happy to repay it. But what do you think of that concept? I mean, we're probably the only company in this space. We've had Jim and you in our studios in Vegas. We have you on our shows here. What do you think of that concept? Are we nuts?
No, we're cut from the same cloth, Lawrence, and I believe the same thing that, competition is good because it makes you better as a person and as a business person. You learn from your competition. So if you're involved or you're interacting with your competition, you're also learning along the way. I don't have a problem at all sharing my ideas with my competition because really they become my colleagues. And if you're a colleague of mine, you're a friend of mine, we can both learn and improve ourselves together. So I'm with you in the same boat here. There is no bringing a competition onto the show. We're bringing colleagues
Yeah,
onto the
and
show.
that's how I feel, Mark. Adam just logged in. Thanks for joining us, Adam Lastman. He comments, no one is better than Mr. Al. I think he's speaking about me. They call me Mr. Al, but we'll allow you to wear that one, Mark. Let's get into the bulk of the show. Let me start asking you some questions, and just to let everybody know out there, if you have any questions that you want myself or Marc Lawrence to answer, please feel free. Mark, my first question to you is, how did you become interested in sports gambling? And I follow that question up with the following. It really seems like the corridor that you come from is the birth, the home, every major handicapper ever comes from that region, whether it's Cleveland or Pennsylvania or, Michigan. I mean, that little corridor has created from you to Marco to Phil Steele to Jim Feist, on and on and on. So I'm guessing that had something to do with it. And were you a bettor before you got into this game?
Well, I learned to become a bettor, and then I got into the game. And it all goes back, I can say this, to as far as high school, Lawrence. When high school, I was really fortunate enough to have a photographic memory in high school, so I didn't have to study a lot for tests. What I saw, I read, I retained. Boom, I was always high on the honor roll society and that type of thing. So I had time in study hall on my hands. I didn't need to study. And so what did I do in study? I love math, I love history, I love music. So what I would do in the study hall is I would learn, because I love sports, I would learn a little bit more about sports than what you read in the newspaper. And that was the sports wagering side of things. So I became a devotee of the gold sheet. I used to take the gold sheet in the study hall with me, and I would read the gold sheet from cover to cover. And that got me ingrained into sports handicapping. Then when I got into sports handicapping along the way, I was really, really thrilled to have made a friendship and acquaintance with Mort Olson, the founder of the Gold Sheet, along the way. A terrific human being, really, really well respected. And I'm glad I was able to cross paths with Mort along the way. And that sort of kick-started me and got me into this industry.
Yeah, and as everybody knows, we are now the owners of this iconic gold sheet, and there's lots of changes being made, updating everything, new website coming along in the next little while. And it's one of the top newsletters out there, standing side by side with Marc Lawrence's work. Mark, me and you have spoken about your database many, many times. I've begged you to sell it to me. I'm still interested in buying it. Tell us about your database, and really, I mean, if anybody has buys picks out there, we know you use that database, more than you brush your teeth. And it's really the underpinning of your entire business, and it is just packed with incredible information.
Let me tell you about my database, Lawrence, and how much ingrained I am into my database. Right now, as we're quarantined, I'm working on our PLAYBOOK Football Preview Guide magazine, which means I have to get into my database every day on every team. If I weren't quarantined, I'd still be into my database every day looking up every team because it's become an obsession of mine. I love to find out new facts and new stats and results and so forth in situations. We are expanding our database. We're growing it even further. Mark Jr. is working with a programmer in London, England, as we're speaking right now. We're bringing college football totals into the situation, and he texted me the other day, and he goes, "Look at this." He says, "Here's the situation: 1 and 26, 1 over 26 unders, National Football League teams in games, double-digit favorites that with a line total of 59 or more." previous line total 49 or less. It's stuff like that, okay, that ends up keeping my database fired up all the time. When I travel from here to Vegas and go to Vegas, I have my laptop with me because I have to be into my database. I call it the well-oiled machine, and I do keep it well-oiled because it's my source of life as far as my industry goes and what it is that I do. So, you know, it doesn't matter how you handicap. You know, you can be a fundamental handicapper, which Dave Olinsky was. He was absolutely, I think, the best at that. You can be a statistical handicapper, a lot like our good old friend Mike Lee was. I don't know if you passed across or ever with Mike Lee in his day, okay? And I like the technical end of things. So the reason I'm bringing these names up, Dave Olinsky, Mike Lee, and myself, is we have one friend, a common denominator of a friend. His name was Lawrence Miller, Larry Miller. And he's since passed away a couple of years ago. But Larry Miller was a real high roller. Him and Billy Walters were the best of friends. And when they made their plays and made their bets, they would share their bets amongst one another. They would help each other for positions and everything. And so what Larry Miller did is he befriended me and Dave Olinsky and Mike Lee because we all brought something different to the table as far as handicapping goes. So my message here is it doesn't matter how you handicap, whether it's technical or whether it's fundamental, statistical. What you want to do is just sharpen up and do what it is that you do best and stick to the program. You know, you can always, you're only going to be as good as everything else that you bring to the table here, and you don't want to live on just one thing alone. So if you can incorporate all three of those aspects into it, that's how you can make your living betting sports, and that's exactly what our friend Larry Miller did.
Well, I'm gonna talk to you a little bit more. We're gonna go deeper into your database, but I want to address a couple of statements in our chat room. Firstly, everybody, thanks for logging on. Make sure to subscribe to our channel. We are the largest sports handicapping YouTube channel in the world by far. And make sure to hit the like button. Make sure to hit the bell. Subscribe to us so that you know when we're doing these live shows. Mark, we got a guy in the chat room named Martin. And Martin, I'm going to address both of your statements because they are interesting and they're worth discussing. The first statement he writes is, Mark, you are one of the best. However, no one knows anything about the outcome of a game. And I'll go first on this one, and then we'll switch over to you. Martin, obviously no one knows the outcome of a game. If Marc Lawrence and I knew the outcome of every game, we wouldn't be wasting an hour of our time doing these shows. Mark would be buying New York because, hell, we'll just roll $1, and in 80 days, that dollar would be able to buy New York. So we might be running for president, et cetera, et cetera. So, of course, none of us know the outcome of a game. What we're trying to do is add one extra win every 20. So to give you an understanding, the difference between going 10-10 in 20 games or 12-8 in 20 games is 2 wins. 11-10 will get you to break even. We just want that one extra win every 20 games. That's it. If I told Marc Lawrence that he would hit 57% for the next 20 years of his betting life, Mark, you would be ecstatic. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I've got a bit of a Woody right now, as you mentioned that, Lawrence, because 57% is exactly what all professionals are looking for. I'll take 56%.
Yeah, I'll take 55 over the next 20 years.
Exactly right. Exactly.
Yeah, and we did a great show, guys. If you go back into the archives and Meet the Experts and you listen to the show with Gianni, the Greek, he really explains it all to you. If you can go 11-10, 12-8 every 20 picks, you are going to make a ton of money. And really, it's the difference, Mark, between, you know, a lot of the amateur bettors, so to speak, and the professionals, and that is really that 1 or 2 extra wins every 20 games. And on top of the fact that we don't parlay, we don't do teasers, but in a straight betting environment, man, 11-9, 12-8 every 20 sounds great to me.
Well, you know, within that context, Lawrence, and that's a great theory that you bring up. It's vitally, critically important if you're going to be doing that to be paying attention dotting the I's and crossing the T's with everything it is that you do. You don't want to end up at the end of the day or the end of the week and look back and say, oh, I lost a game because I forgot to bet that game, or I overbet that game. For whatever reasons of error there are, you have to eliminate those. You can't blame everything on operator error, and that's part of running a business. So it's critically important that what it is that you're doing, make sure that you're dotting all the I's, crossing the T's, and checking the boxes.
Mark, the second, first I just want to say, Big Ragu, welcome. Jordan Kane, we love seeing you here. And yeah, man, funny remark. Ace explains everything. That dude can talk. Yeah, that dude can talk like nobody's business. I'd love to see a press conference between him and Trump. Mark, the other thing that...
Don't get me going there.
We're not going there. There's no insult. No, the guy can just talk. Mark, I'm the most loquacious cat around, so I'm not insulting talkers.
He can talk, I can talk, but the difference between he and I is he's got a line of bullshit, and I don't. I just tell it like it is.
The next question Martin asks, and this is going to lead straight into your database again. Last year's games have nothing to do with this year's games. Now, Mark, we hear this a lot in our space, and, expanding on that, why it is 20 years of stats. How does it affect this year or next year? And a lot of guys think it doesn't. And I mean, I always give out an example about, the Toronto Raptors. If you go back and you look over the years, they go out on the West Coast and then they come home and for some reason they play a 1 p.m. Eastern Sunday game. That is a play against every time. And it's been proven over and over and over again. And it doesn't matter who's coaching them. And it doesn't matter which players are playing. And it doesn't matter what team they're playing against. That trend holds true. Can you talk to us about Martin's statement that last year's games have nothing to do with this year's games?
Okay, first of all, let me set the table and say this. That's a great question, Martin, and it's one that I get asked probably more than any other question. And the reason people ask me, why do you rely so heavily in your database for past results when these are different teams playing the game today that played the game even last year? The answer is simple. Technical handicapping is all about cause and effect. And if you can recreate cause and effect, you can expect similar results. And for a perfect example is just this. When I'm handicapping a lot of these games, especially the National Football League is made up of 32 teams that are basically machines. That's the way I look at them. 2 or 3 or 4 of them are exceptional. They're at the very top of the league. 2 or 3 or 4 of them are pathetic, and they're at the very bottom of the league. Everybody in between can beat anybody on any given weekend, and it'll be no surprise. Nobody's jaw is going to drop. Because of that, what I do is I call it putting tape over the names of the teams, a theory of mine. You just put tape over the names of the teams. Forget about who they are, what their expectation is, what the public thinks, so forth and whatnot. Then I go into my database and I open up my database and I ask the database, okay, not knowing who played the games before in the past, who's playing today, I'm looking at games situationally and I'm asking myself, if I can recreate what caused this effect in football games, and I can lump games and I can look at 10 years of results and look at teams as an example. I'm going to give you an example, real simple, real stupid, okay? National Football League, 3 games in a row, on the road, what do teams do when they come home? Doesn't matter who that team is or what that team record is and so forth and whatnot. The odds maker is the person that takes care of the spread in games like that. I don't ever handicap the odds maker. He does a terrific job, and that's what he's paid to do, and he does it better than anybody else. I'm not going to handicap the odds maker. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the situation of every game and find out exactly what I've seen in the past. If I've seen for 30 years of results of teams that come home off of a 3-game road trip, and they're a division home underdog, and it tells me that these teams are 48 wins and 12 losses against the point spread, that's a pretty nice situation that I want to look for. That's cause and effect. So that's exactly what technical handicapping is, and that's the reason why I rely on history so much when it comes to handicapping my game.
And listen, Martin put a follow-up up, and, I'm not here to single out Martin. Martin, I really appreciate what you're saying because it's really, it's the impetus of a great conversation between Mark and myself. He writes like that he coached a basketball team had a different team every year, and that different team had a different record every year. So Martin, you're looking at this holistically, every year, look, every coach has had different teams every year, and every team has a different record. Bill Belichick hasn't won the Super Bowl every single year. We're looking at isolated situations. So to give you an example, Martin, specific to you and your team, over the many years you coached your basketball team and over the many years that they were different teams, my guess is if they stayed up for 3 straight days without any sleep once all year for 20 years, you will lose the game they play without sleep for 3 days every single time.
That's a good handicap, okay.
But that's the point, Mark, is that we're not looking at this holistically. We're looking at the individual. Some of the stuff works, some of it doesn't. We see, in hockey, which I do a lot of hockey, if Tampa Bay plays Boston twice in a row and then Boston is on the road against the worst team in the league, that worst team in the league has a lot of value on them. So we're not discussing the fact that Boston or Tampa Bay's record is going to be the same over an 82-game period. We're discussing where are the trends that show themselves to be consistently accurate.
Well, those trends, as you mentioned, Lawrence, and this is really critically important also, is to be able to differentiate between trends and systems. Okay, trends apply to teams, systems apply to the whole league. So if you're looking in handicapping teams, the Philadelphia Eagles and what the Philadelphia Eagles do in the past, I think you're spinning your wheels and wasting time. If you're looking at what the Philadelphia Eagles are doing this year, that's really, really relevant because it's something that's being produced on the field by the players that are playing the game today. Now, if you're looking at the same situation involving the whole league and not just the Philadelphia Eagles, that's when cause and effect kicks in and becomes an important, valuable handicapping tool. So I'm not handicapping a trend on a team. I'm handicapping a league in a situation. Thus, I'm getting the systems and angles, and that's, I think, a critical part in handicapping.
Mark, let's talk about Ralph Michaels for a second. He's of the same school of thought as you. He is one of the best of the best. One of the core guys at wagertalk.com really relies on these databases and these systems and trends as much as you do. Ralph worked with you, speaks so highly of you. Where do you put him in the grand echelon of expert handicappers out there?
Well, Ralph ranks at the top of all handicapping ladders, if you will, and a couple of reasons. One, I admire him as a person. Most importantly, first and foremost, as a person. Number two, he's a very, very hard worker. I know that from his days when he worked with Phil Steele, and I know that from his days when he was working with me. And what Ralph's, I think, greatest asset and greatest ability is being able to go out and find the information. A lot of people might not have that ability to do just that. If I need anything, if I'm looking for something that is really, really difficult to find, I could just send a text.
So do you still have a relation? Are you doing that currently? Because I know that I mean, the amount of media you do is ridiculous, and Ralph is right there with you. Are you, a lot of people, the VEASAN guys and, radio show hosts all over the country, I mean, they're emailing Ralph all the time, and I'm sure they are with you. But do you and Ralph communicate?
Well, yeah, we do. We'll text or we'll send emails, and we'll share information. And again, go back to his days with Phil Steele. A lot of what I did or still do, Phil does a lot of the same things. He'll kind of, I don't want to say imitate or mimic or do the things that I'm doing, but he's been known to at least take a crack at doing something that's working for somebody. Ralph is a lot like that as well. Anything that is successful, Ralph will jump right on, and Ralph is really, really good at honing down on that information and getting the best out of it. And that's what I like about him, because he rolls up his sleeves and he's a real hard worker.
Mark, hey, Catch, Caleb, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for logging on. The director asks a really great question. He asks, how would you rank your preferred sports to handicap? And we're going to get to that. But it really is relevant, because if you take a look at somebody like Dave Koken, who, as you know, I mean, iconic person in the space, he's just so good at baseball and college football. His college football and his NFL don't compare. And then you spin it around and look at Tony Finn. This guy is 61% in the last 7 years of NFL betting, and just slightly over 500 in college football. We all have our what we are best at, what we are not. With you relying so heavily on that database, I'm guessing NFL and college football really drives your game.
Unquestionably, that's the strength of the database, is college and pro football. We have NBA and college basketball as well that we analyze, but I can say this to the success of whether it's college football or the NFL each and every year, and why there are differences in the results. And there are going to be differences in the results, because not everything stays in the same track the same way all the time. I'm coming off a really rocky year last year. I had a really, really good run here, Lawrence. I'd won 10 of the previous 11 years and done really, really well, and things were cooking well. It was going real well for me last football season until it got to be November, and the bottom just come out. Nothing in my database worked, and it didn't matter whether it was college football or whether it was pro football. It just flat out didn't work. And you're going to run into patches like that, and this is why it ties back into betting for a living, or wagering properly, because you're betting out of a bankroll and you're playing percentages, so you're cutting down when you're losing and going through those rough periods of time. That's the key to staying alive and surviving, is what it really truly is. So along this good run that I had that I've just been describing to you, National Football League, to me, these what I call these machines were relying heavily on the oil coming from the well-oil database, and they were just had really, really terrific runs. But last year, all of a sudden, it jumped off track. So what does that mean for me this football season here? It tells me, even I'll throw stuff to you just personally. My wife says to me, she says, well, what is it that you're not doing now that you were doing before? And my answer to that was nothing. I'm doing the same thing I did before. The results just aren't there. And it's going to happen, because it's wagering, okay? It's what it's all about. We talked about 53%, 54, 55%. You're never going to win at a sustained high rate forever, and the law of averages eventually always creeps in, and that's when you have to have your bankroll there to protect you.
And Mark, on that note, and Martin, Mark and I didn't take any of the statements you said negatively. You weren't being argumentative, and you really led us into a brilliant conversation. So thank you, Martin. On that note, Mark, one of the things that I find fascinating is, we've been doing this for so long. I'm close to 30 years. You're probably close to 50, if I had to guess. What people don't realize, Mark, and I had a terrible NFL season last year as well, and I too had won about 10 of my last 11 prior. So we were in the same boat. What people don't realize is, if you bet 10 days, only 10 days, just bet Monday to Wednesday of the following week, if one of those days is really bad, that's the equivalent of betting 10 years, and one of the years are really bad. And that's what a lot of the people don't seem to realize, is that we can't do anything about it. I mean, over a 10-day period, we're going to have bad days, and over a 10-year period, we're going to have bad years.
Yeah, it goes down to that simple adage, that we want to win the battles to win the war, and we're not going to win every battle. And there's going to be battles where we're going to get beat up pretty good, and we're wondering what we're doing in this battle for it to begin with, but we're in it because that's what we love doing. It's what preoccupies us. So you can lose a battle, you can lose another battle, but roll up your sleeves and keep your nose to the grindstone, because sooner or later, by doing your work, you're going to end up winning out in the end.
Mark, Scott Brown just wrote, Scott, thanks for joining us, by the way. Bet less during a cold streak. I want to speak to that, because that's really the core of money management from my perspective. I agree and I don't agree. So I don't agree because I never change my bet size. I do agree because my bet size changes by itself. What I mean by that is if you're betting 5% of your bankroll or 3% of your bankroll on every single play, the actual percent of your bankroll doesn't ever change, whether you're in a cold streak or a hot streak, but your bet size does. So if you actually lose 20 games in a row, which I've never done, I think 14 or something was my most many years ago. But if you lose 20 games in a row, betting the exact same percent of your bankroll from start to finish, if you actually only lost about 17 games if it was the exact same dollar unit. Conversely, if you win 20 games in a row, you've actually won about 23 games in a row if you were betting the same specific dollar unit. So, Scott, I never bet less during a cold streak. My bets are less during a cold streak, if that makes sense.
Yeah, your bankroll dictates that,
right.
Lawrence. And that's exactly what's critical about the bankroll. People say bet less when you're losing. Well, if you're following a strict bankroll method, you are betting less when you're losing because your percentage of your bets are smaller because your bankroll is smaller. So you don't have to be a genius and figure out what you need to be betting. Just play according to your bankroll.
Mark, this show is going phenomenal. I mean, you're so polished. You're so great on this stuff. I mean, you've been doing media forever. Are you still doing radio all the time? I mean, obviously not now during Corona, but like, are you doing 100 shows a week still type thing?
Well, those days are in the rearview mirror. I was doing upwards of 50 shows a week. Now I would say safe. I'm probably doing about 20 of them right now. But they're the shows that I've been doing the longest with. With the people that I build up a real good friendship and a relationship with. So, the bottom line is I try to create a media day. I call it a media day, largely Wednesdays.
Oh, you do them all.
Right. So I try to knock the majority of them out then. And not everybody, of course, can be on the same table on Wednesday. So there'll be a few on Thursday, a few on Friday, even a couple Saturday morning. But the bottom line here is I love doing it because I love doing what you're doing with you right now, answering questions, because anybody listening here, if they're listening, if they can walk away and learn any one thing from this interview today that they didn't know before, that's going to be beneficial.
You a golfer?
Am I a gopher?
Golfer. Like putting, drives, Tiger Woods.
Oh, a golfer. Yeah, I used to golf. I live on a real nice golf course down here in South Florida. But I've had a couple of back surgeries. That's what brought me to South Florida from Cleveland here. And I ripped my L5 disc out twice on a golf course. And, the doctor said to me the first time, he was from Austria, spoke very broken English, and I didn't know what happened in the operation. I come out of the operation, and I says, how did it look, Doc? He says, you have the worst effing disc I've ever seen in my life. Well, I says, can I golf? He says, if you're stupid enough, you can golf. And I went back out and I golfed, and I ripped it out again. So I've learned to just watch the golfers and not golf anymore.
Kane, great question. Prez, do you change your bankroll percentage on bets every day then? My bankroll percentage, no. Kane, I would say about 95, give or take, about 95% of all my bets are 4% of my bankroll. I would say maybe 4% or so are about 5% of my bankroll, and maybe 1 or 2% is about 3% of my bankroll. There are days that I occasionally will make a stupid parlay, Vivian's over, we're going to watch hockey all night, that type of thing. But to give you perspective, if I'm betting $1,000, if 4% of my bankroll is $1,000, my parlay is $20. So it's completely irrelevant. But that's really my answer. I mean, Mark, what about you? I mean, if you had to isolate it down to what percentage of your bankroll do you bet?
Well, I do the same thing you do, Lawrence, and coincidentally, I use the same figures. 3, 4, and 5% is what I do. And is there a time when I will, like you do, throw a small little $50 play on a game for what they would call shits and giggles? No, I don't do that anymore, because I can watch the game and I still can laugh and enjoy the game. So it is, to me, a business, and maybe I have that too much ingrained in me. But the bottom line is I do stick to my bankroll.
Mark, I got some more questions I'm going to ask you, but the next question I'm going to ask you is this. you have watched Wager Talk. You've watched my career for 20 years. I mean, me and you met very early on in my career. I built a company called Who to Bet On, an online business. I sold it in 2007. I left the industry for a while. I came back in 2014. You've watched Rick Alec grow. You've watched Johnny Detroit grow. You've watched Marco D'Angelo grow. As a paternal figure in a lot of our lives and a man that we deeply respect, how about some advice to Wager Talk on how we can continue growing our business and being the best we can be?
Well, I have to say this. I think what you guys, I really admire what it is you're doing, and you're doing it right now in the here and the now in the social media world. You're reaching the right people. You're sending the right messages out. So all I can say is keep on keeping on. Keep on doing what it is that you're doing here. And there's no reason to change, no reason to do anything different, because the old saying, Lawrence, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You guys are doing a terrific job.
Thanks, Mark. And I'll tell you, man, we feel like we're from the school of Marc Lawrence. I mean, when we look at all the icons and we have to say, who do we most emulate from a business model and also a personal model, it's definitely you, Mark. You've been instrumental in all of our lives. And the fact that you weren't cold calling people at a time when cold calling was the thing to do, mensch, my friend, that's what you are. Okay, so tell us, what is the best accomplishment you've had in this business? What is like the pinnacle moment for you?
Well, it's probably more of a selfish moment within the industry, but I really, really enjoyed winning the 2005 Stardust Invitational Football Contest. It came down to Fez and I,
Yep.
and we were a little bit different people. I was, he was 20 years younger than I, and he had his young crowd in the audience, rooting for him, and I had the older people rooting for me. But the bottom line is, when we had to make our final selections here, we had to turn in 7 plays. This is an interesting story. We had to turn in our final 7 plays to determine the ultimate winner of the Invitational, and we lined up on 4 games exactly the same. So thus it then came down to a 3-pick or a 3-game contest, 3-game, and it was unbelievable. And it wasn't ultimately decided until the very final play of a game in the very final selection. So that's how close it really truly was. And I really respected him as a person, because at the time he was a real strong icon in Las Vegas. He still is. He was a real strong icon in Las Vegas. And always famous about getting the best number, and that's that's what Steve does. He's out there shopping for the best number. I'm more of a handicapper and looking for the technical things, but I made sure that I lined up on those games with the best number, because I knew Steve Fezzik was going to be on those best numbers. So I handicapped the handicapper and ended up winning the contest.
Yeah, good strategy. Kane, what you just wrote is 100% correct. So yes, you fully understood what we were talking about. Mark, what was the best life path change you've ever made? Were you a drinker, a druggie?
Well, I was never much of a druggie. In the days,
I don't like that word, by the way, because I was one, and I was just a normal guy. But go on.
Well, in the days, I had my fair share of pot. I didn't like it, and my parents were alcoholics, so it was easy for me to also indulge. And I got to the point in my life, I was 39 years old, and I said to myself one morning, I said, you can be a whole lot better person than you are right now, and you can be a better person than you are right now. And I decided that day that no more pot, no more drinking. That was it for me. I went sober, and I've been sober ever since. And it was the best decision I ever made in my life, because my whole business turned around. My relationship with my high school sweetheart, who's my wife here today of 52 years, became even better, if it's possible. And my whole life just opened up. So turning sober was the best thing that ever happened to me in my life.
Nicely said, Mark. I mean, we got a lot of young guys that watch us and listen to us, and they enjoyed 420 yesterday, and we got no problem with that. I mean, listen, we were all young once. But I agree, Mark. I mean, I was a hardcore pot smoker for 25 years of my life, and I quit cold turkey when I hit 40. I'm 51 now, and it was the best thing I ever did as well.
We did the same thing. I was just it was the day before I turned 40, so we were on the same path.
Yeah. And for me, it was amazing. It was actually, I was flying down to Florida when it all happened. For all the people interested, you should have seen the fat one I rolled as my last goodbye. 9 grams, 11 papers. Mark.
Oh, Willie Nelson outdid you, Lawrence, I'm sure.
What?
I said probably only Willie Nelson ever outdid
Yeah,
that.
dude, it took 1 hour to smoke. That was my last one. Mark, what kind of music do you like? I'm a hardcore classic rock guy. Pink Floyd is my band.
Well, let me tell you this real quickly here. I grew up on the poor side of the tracks, down in the boondocks. My father was in the Navy. I was raised in the Navy projects. I was class president in high school in the 9th grade, and I ended up going to 3 high schools because we couldn't pay the rent. It was really, really difficult, a tough childhood that I had. We had no money, and the one thing that I wanted to do, because I knew I wasn't going to be able to go to college, I love music, and because I love music, I had signed up for radio broadcasting school, and that was going to be what I was going to do. That was going to be my occupation, but we couldn't pay for the radio broadcasting class. So that became a stick in my side. I couldn't do that. But growing up, I do love music. I love all kinds of music. I was a classic rock guy, a kid growing up here. I collected every 45 record on Tuesdays from jukeboxes. They used to unload jukeboxes, and they would bring the old 45s into a drugstore, and I would buy them up right away. I would buy every 45
You still
that I
have
had.
them?
I still have them. I knew the name on the hit side and the flip side. I used to know all that stuff. So music is my love. And then when I married my wife, she's a coal miner's daughter from West Virginia. And I couldn't help but be taken aboard and brought into country music because when I was with their family, that's what it was. And I've since become endured to country music here. I really, really love country music and what it is today. So while I love the rock and roll, but I can go through all the eras with you, the Motowns, the Beatles, Bruce Springsteen was my favorite. But I love first and foremost country music, and that's what I play today.
Well, me and you will disagree on that, and most of the listeners know I'm not neutral about country music. I can't stand it. There are some stuff I like. I actually even like that one Carrie Underwood song, and you take my card and do, and then da blah blah blue doo doo. I don't know, but whatever. It's part of the Shania Twain group of country music, that sort of country pop that Shania started. But I can't stand country music. I find there's no depth to it, Mark.
Let me tell you this one thing. While you're locked down right now, you're quarantined, you've got nothing to do. There was a series that was just presented by Ken Burns. And
he's the best. Oh my God. His Vietnam series is the greatest documentary ever made, and the baseball one is the second greatest. If Ken Burns does a documentary, I want to see it. Please tell me.
Well, then good. Well, then you just committed yourself,
I'm in,
my friend, because he did a documentary called Country Music. And what he does is he looks at the life of country music from the 40s up until today.
Where?
Well, it was on HBO, but you can go get it on demand. Just you can stream it somewhere. Yep. I guarantee you watch it from the beginning to the end. You'll say to me next time I talk to you, you'll say, "Hey, man, I'm a country music."
I'm going to start tonight. I hate country music, but I love Ken Burns.
He's terrific.
Yeah, it's actually unbelievable. What's the best career decision you've ever made?
The best career decision I ever made. Well, I would say it was difficult for me to do because I'm a hands-on person, okay? And as my business was growing here, my son came into the business, and he labored and he worked for us. But I have now delegated a lot of what it is that I do off to him because he's the techie guy. He does the databasing and he does that type of stuff. And it was hard for me to do. A parent handing it off to his child and let that child run with it, but that really was the best career decision that I've made.
And Junior is a smart guy. Please send my love to him. Is he still going under the Cincinnati Kid, even though he's about 50?
He's not really into the handicapping. He's more into building this new database for us. He runs a little business, I'll tell you this, just creatively him. He supplies information, sports betting information to prisoners.
Yes.
And they subscribe to him, and he's built up a really an unbelievable business doing just that, delivering that business. So he gathers us all this information. He's got a program that writes and sends it out automated every night. So he's doing that, and he's also tending to me and what it is my needs are. So he's really grown up to somebody that I really, really love and respect.
Mark, we're going to start winding the show down. Let's talk about the draft tomorrow. It's a topic. Thursday, it's a topical conversation. I know you've had extremely good luck making bets on the draft and giving out information on the draft. So sell, baby.
Well, what we've got right now is every year I've been doing for the last 5 years, putting, like everybody in the world does, as you know, Lawrence, a playbook mock draft, and we've done really, really well with the mock draft, and that's available. You can check it out now online at playbook.com, our mock draft. And now is the time that we're in where prop bets are really, really popular. And since we're quarantined, since we don't have sports to bet on, betting on this National Football League draft is going to probably be more money taken in the draft than there's ever been in the history of the draft before. But that being the case, I have 5 props that I had worked up here, and I'm going to share one of them with you. And it's more about value than anything, okay? And everything that we do in handicapping all starts and ends with value, because if you don't have value in what it is you're doing, you're chasing bad numbers, you're not going to win in the end. It's a Steve Fezzik philosophy. I adapt it into what it is that I do handicapping. If you don't have value, forget the play. So the value that I have in one of these props that I'm playing here is wide receivers are very popular, very, very strong draft this year for wide receivers. And because of it, the betting public is going to be all over the wide receivers. When you get into propositions, especially Super Bowl propositions, the betting public loves to bet on the overs and the yeses. That's as square as it can possibly be. And because they do that, it creates value if you can make a case for going no and to the under when you're betting on props. And I'm going to be going under 5.5 wide receivers to be drafted in the first round. And people are telling me, you've got to be crazy, man. This is the deepest class there's been almost in memory. And yes, that is the deepest class that there's almost been in memory. But if you go back and you look at since you go back to 2000, there have been a total of 73 wide receivers that were taken in the first round. That averages 3.65 wide receivers in the first round. And only 4 of the drafts since 2000 have there been 6 or more wide receivers selected. The key to this whole prop to me is this: there's so much value to the prop that, and the GMs realized the dearth of these wide receivers here. They know that there's going to be plenty of wide receivers there in the second round to take as well. So they're going to address other vital needs when they're in front of them, knowing that they can get to some wide receivers in the second round. So I played at DraftKings under 5.5 plus 160 for the wide receivers in the first round.
Mark, I've already seen a lot of your draft predictions. You've got the first wide receiver going in the 12 spot to the Raiders, Lamb before Judy.
Yeah, well, that's based a lot. I know Jerry Judy's he's going to be a terrific pro, but that's based a little bit more on the coach John Gruden, and I think John Gruden sees more in Lamb than he does in Judy. And CeeDee Lamb, he's a ball player that could end up, being a Hall of Fame type player if he stays straight and
he's
does everything.
He's the best.
Just really,
yeah, him and Young are the 2 best athletes in this draft. Period.
They are, for sure, and because of John Gruden and his affection, or what he at least acknowledges his affection for CeeDee Lamb and everything he's done, that's why I slotted him first.
Yeah, and you got San Fran taking Judy next. So, and then Ruggs. Yeah, no, I really love this information that you've provided me. How good do you think Burrow's going to be? I mean, I think Oregon's quarterback, Hebert, as we would call him in Canada, is going to be a bust. But I think Burrow is going to be a monster.
Let me tell you about Joe Burrow and what I know about him, Lawrence. He's from Ohio, where I'm from. He was all Mr. Ohio basketball player of the year. He's a tremendous athlete. He could have made a career in the NBA if that's the path that he chose to wanted to go down. But he loved football. So he goes to Ohio State, and what happens when he goes to Ohio State? He signs up with a class that was the deepest class Ohio State has ever had in 2015. he was behind three quarterbacks there. So obviously he had to make a move, and he made that move to go to LSU. So when LSU got him, they found out what he's all about, his skill set. And his skill set isn't what you just saw in the games with LSU throughout the season here. The kid has a photographic memory. He can read defenses like we can read the comics every day, okay? That's his ability. He's able to dissect what defense he's going up against and make adjustments on the fly. That's what he does absolutely the best. So he's got the physical tools. He's got the ability. I think he's going to be a superstar. He might even be the next Tom Brady.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I'm not buying into the fact that we just saw him set all these records here with LSU, because usually I'll fade the grain on stuff like that.
Look at
it's just
guys
what
like
I know
Joey
about him.
Harrington.
Yeah, there you go. From Oregon. So, but it's what I know about him, and I think he'll be a real success in the National Football League.
Mark, any advice for our listeners as far as winning in sports betting, and then we'll call this a show.
Well, my simple advice is, I had started a university for learning, Lawrence. It was called Sports Data University. And quick little sidebar note here, Dave Malinsky and I started the school. Dave was like me. He has a love for teaching people, and that's what he did the best. So Dave and I together, we banded together to start Sports Data University. And we were going to put on classes and inform people how to do things right and properly. Unfortunately, Dave went hiking, and the sad story ended up being what it was. So the Sports Data University project was put on hold because of that. So if I'm giving classes at Sports Data University, I'm talking about handicapping 101. I think my number one philosophy is my Woody Hayes philosophy of sports handicapping. And being from Ohio State, and everybody knows of Woody Hayes and how he loved to pound the ball on the ground, he'd run the ball at everybody, and he was just a mean son of a gun. But the bottom line is he was a winner. And somebody asked Woody Hayes, why is it you always run the football? Run, 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 run. He says, I run the football simply because if you throw the football, three things can happen, and two of them are bad. The pass can be intercepted, it can be incomplete, or it can be caught. But if you run the football, three things can happen, and two of them are good. It's the same thing in handicapping sports. If you bet the underdogs, three things can happen, and two of them are good. You can win straight up, you can cash the ticket and cover the spread, but if you bet the favorites, three things can happen. Only one thing is good. They have to win and cover. So my philosophy in sports handicapping is the Woody Hayes philosophy of looking for live dogs.
Brilliant. That's an amazing analogy and a great story. And Mark, it's really been a privilege for me to do this with you for the last hour. I could go all day, Mark, but we're going to keep this show to an hour and 10 minutes. I can't thank you enough. Please send my love to Colleen and Mark Jr. and be safe down there. Thank you for helping out with the testing and whatnot. I'm sure we will have football soon, and I hope, like myself, that you bounce back and have an outstanding NFL season. Best wishes, my friend. And guys, make sure to check tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern, the Soccer Show with Carmine Bianco, myself, and Nick Borman, and Gianni Minty and Kelly on Straight from the Strip. Mark, you're just such a wonderful guy.
Likewise, Lawrence, right back to you and the crew at Wager Talk. You guys keep up all the good work and stay safe.